Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Tarot is Ridiculous. Okay, so even though you guys are looking at this like it's a live drop video, we have actually pre-recorded this episode. So this is the first pre-recorded episode we have of this particular podcast. And today, my guest is the very special Erin Jones from Hermit and the Moon. And I am so excited to have her on today and to talk about the card that she has selected for us. But first, Erin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, through this podcast, we're actually talking to a lot of different people in the tarot industry because I don't sometimes think that people understand that there's more in the tarot industry than just readers. So you've met so far on this podcast people who have big businesses in tarot, obviously myself, who is a deck creator, and we have had some readers on the show. And Erin is actually a reader. And one of the reasons that I put this podcast together was to show the very different multitudes of different faces inside this tarot industry, because I think sometimes the view of what happens in our world is a little narrow. So welcome, Erin, and tell us, how long have you been reading for, and what readings do you specialize in?
I've been reading for myself, friends and family for a few decades. So started kind of in the early 90s. I had one deck for a very long time, and then right around 2018, I discovered the magic of deck collecting and took a real deep dive right back into it. That's when I started offering, actually, I did a bit of studying and then I started offering readings for the public. I specialize in non-predictive tarot, so I don't tell the future or predict events that are going to happen. My readings are more reflective, affirming, validating, offer some guidance and clarity in the current present moment. And also, I am going to start offering some relationship readings. And by that, I mean not readings about relationships, but readings where two folks or more folks come together and I pull a card for each person and kind of reflect on what they may be bringing to the relationship, and then pull a third card, just kind of taking a peek at the relationship itself.
I like the distinction between non-predictive because, again, I think there are a few little myths in our industry. And yes, some readers do predictive readings, but they're not the only ones. Could you talk about, like, when you decided in your journey, like, that was the path you were going to take, was to focus on the here and now and not what could or could not possibly happen in the future?
Sure. I mean, I feel like most of my experience with tarot so far in this past few years has been an intuitive approach to the cards. So I know that there are different sort of ways that people learn the tarot, and sometimes it can be really rooted in like memorization. And I feel like for me, because I was on a track that was more intuitive, it truly unfolded and blossomed that way. So future predicting never really made sense to me when I've had readings like that. That are real direct, like this will happen at this time kind of prediction. It hasn't really served me well. So for me, offering something that feels more like a collaboration with your future is kind of where I come from, where it's like, hey, here are some reflections, a little bit of guidance, some things you can do to help you create the future that you want with this tool by your side.
Yeah, I love that, because I think most people miss the fact that what they do right now is actually what creates the future. So having a really good understanding of where you are right in this second and getting that navigational guidance from the here and now is so super important.
Absolutely.
So I love that. I think that that is really beneficial, and you are so clear and concise about that. Because again, I think like there are a few, and this comes into the ridiculous, right? There are some really ridiculous myths around how to use the cards, how to use tarot. I have pretty much dedicated my entire career to trying to come up with different ways to use these cards and look at these cards and deepen an understanding of each of the cards, and to be able to ground a client into that present moment and to get them to really have a good look at what the energies are at play here and now. For me personally, I think that is like more helpful than guesstimating what could come down the line.
Absolutely. I think it serves a purpose, and that purpose is like, I really emphasize the word affirmation, right? Sharing information or insight around something that the person already knows is so much more powerful than some like mysterious thing, right? It really, I think, kind of brings up this deeply affirming, feeling really seen, feeling really understood kind of experience that people are seeking, I think, when they want to engage with anyone who is sort of holding space or counsel, with another person.
Exactly. And I think that is a great segue into our card of the week, to be honest. Now, if you've been watching this podcast for a little while, then you know that each week I ask my guests to pick their favorite card, mainly because I'm always really interested at what cards we're attracted to, and I want to know why, because like I'm like a toddler in that respect. Why? So Erin, tell me, what is your card and why do you love it so much?
So my card is the Eight of Cups, and I love it because of many reasons, obviously. One, I feel like it really invites that recognition that walking away from things is always going to be part of the experience, right? Changing paths and directions, like learning how to walk away from something that we've very likely poured a lot of ourselves into. And this is, to me, like evolutionary and transformative. Also, I am born on the last day of the zodiac calendar, March 20th, and that feels so relevant to me, this like endings part, this like completion piece. And then, with this eclipsing moon that often happens in that card, there's also this accelerated feeling of like, once I surrender to that, letting go, so much happens so quickly. So I feel like all of those reasons and many more are why this is like my card.
So show us your card, and what deck did you select it from for this week?
So I'm using the Mesquite Tarot. And this is it. The Eight of Cups in this deck is really beautiful and different, and the gentleness of this deck is what really draws me to it. And this particular card has that real shedding of old skin feeling. And that is so, just the energy of that and the invitation of that releasing of something old really is profound to me in this particular version of the card.
I was telling Erin off camera as we were looking at our cards, because I'm using the Mermaid Tarot. And I was telling Erin, like, while we were off camera, like, I can't get into her card because of this snake. And this is where like visual literacy and visual sensitivity really does come into how we pick decks. And the reason I can't do snakes is because I grew up in the Australian bush. For those who don't know anything about the Australian bush, we have these massive 8 feet brown snakes that can kill you in 20 minutes. So like snakes are not my friend. They've never been my friend. I have been trained for a very long time to kill snakes first, ask questions later. So any card that has a snake on it or a deck that's predominantly snakes, I'm just gonna like go no. But I think that, like, again, this comes down to, there are so many things about different variations of the same card that sometimes maybe in a deck we really relate to, like Erin really relates to that, the shedding of the skin and the metamorphosis and the transformation and that real kind of goddess energy inside that particular version of the Eight of Cups. And, you know, someone like me really, I can never know where my camera is. Someone like me really loves this particular variation of the, you know, I always called this version of the Eight of Cups in the Mermaid Tarot well, it was a good idea at the time, but now I've got to leave quickly and swiftly before anyone else can questions me about what the hell just happened.
I love that. It also has such a selkie energy, right? So it still has that shedding of the skin feeling, just a different representation, right? Like putting back on the seal skin and slipping back into the ocean, right?
Right. I always call it like, you know, the morning after a bad decision. The morning after the bad decision. Because to me, sometimes that's what the Eight of Cups can also represent, because cups are emotional. So it can be like, well, we thought something was going to be really great, but now that we've sat with it and all of these emotions have arisen, we're like, you know, on second thoughts, this kind of feels icky. And
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to put as much distance between me and this as humanly possible.
Yes.
And I think that's timely because this podcast is dropping on Valentine's Day. So this is the opposite of the cheery Valentine's Day message. This is listen, if it don't feel good, get out.
I love that. You know, I think that there is nuance, right? I mean, I think that there are these sort of collective celebrations, and they can be lovely for people who are in a space where that does feel really fulfilling and beautiful. And then it can also be, you know, depressing for people who are feeling pressured, right? So I feel like I also love that this is dropping on Valentine's Day and that we're not focusing on the lover's card, for example.
Exactly. So like we're giving you different variations of what does emotional fulfillment mean to you on this fabricated day that Hallmark capitalized on, and now we're all brainwashed into. So but you know, this day actually has a pretty horrific history. So I do feel like having the Eight of Cups on February 14th is kind of honoring some of the mixed energy that comes up here, because for some people this day is going to be really good, for others it's going to not be so great, and there are going to be some emotions and feelings that come up today that maybe don't feel some good, and maybe you do need to take some distance and time away from. And that's where you want to pull this card out. Maybe the Eight of Cups is going to be your Valentine's Day card, because it's going to remind you that how you personally feel is one of the most important things around self-care and self-love.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, inevitably people have a tendency to reflect on relationship at this time, mostly because it's in your face, right? And to me,
Exactly.
it's like, what about reflecting on the emotional maturity that we have gained through a plethora of experiences we may have had up until this point, right? It isn't about perfectionism, right? It's more about exploration and really honoring the history and also wherever you are right now in the moment.
I love that, because, you know, there is a level of emotional intelligence attached to this card, because being able to walk away from something or being able to say that this doesn't work is a level of emotional intelligence that says this is not fulfilling, this is not giving me joy, this is not creating something that I really feel is going to be long-term or sustainable. So being able to take that emotion and then make these very conscious strategic decisions with this Eight of Cups to then move towards something that is going to be more fulfilling, is going to provide a lot more nurturing, is going to be a lot more replenishing, is actually, you know, part of that higher level, they call it, you know, EI. So like, I love that too. I love that as a variation for this card.
Absolutely. I feel like with every card, there's just so many possibilities. And even just in this short conversation, we've come across such a beautiful unfolding of this card, which is part of the reason why I love tarot.
Yeah. And it's part of the reason I love having these conversations, because being able to bounce ideas off other people who sit with these cards and live with these cards on a daily basis is incredible, you know. And I joked when I was presenting at the Tabby conference earlier this year that tarot people will take a meaning of a card down a rabbit hole for days, weeks, months, years, and like they'll just get totally lost in it.
Absolutely. And that is the joy of it, right? I mean, I think,
Right.
you know, you mentioned at the beginning, like this curiosity and wonder piece, right? And you mentioned like I'm like a toddler this way, and I think we're like a page this way, right?
Yeah. I'm definitely lower than a page. All right, so we have come to the end of our time here. Erin, tell us, how do people find you?
So my website is hermitandthemoon.com. And my Instagram is hermit_and_the_moon. Those are the two places that you'll be able to find kind of what I'm up to, what I'm doing. I'm also the house reader in the Ritual Society, spelled with a W, like the planner. And I offer monthly tarot talks in that space. And that is a paid subscription space. And those are, and locally in Denver, all of my kind of offerings are listed in both Instagram and on my website.
Fantastic. So like you can find her everywhere, basically. Erin, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for sharing your incredible insights into the Eight of Cups.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, that's it for this week's episode of Tarot is Ridiculous, because sometimes it really, really is. I hope you got something out of today. If you are a newbie and you just learned something new and fascinating about this card, please go ahead and drop a comment below the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to help the algorithm. All right, I will see you next week with our next guest. Bye for now.